So, good morning. As editor-in-chief of La Civita Cattolica, I'm very happy to welcome you all to Villa Malta, this building. This building has had an important history at the service of culture and research, and since 1950 it has hosted the La Civita Cattolica, the Jesuit journal founded in 1850, and as well the Jesuit community who is in charge of its publication. Looking back before 1950, Villa Malta has been the home of families and also ambassadors coming from different countries, especially from Malta, Germany, Sweden, and Russia. In its long history, this building has seen as well the presence of many artists, writers, and their works. It is a tradition that comes until more recent times. This very room reminds us of the presence of Russian and German families who lived here till 1929. But outside this room, you can admire paintings by Lamberto Ciabatta, who died in 1981, and on the first floor, you can see paintings by Fratel Venzo, a Jesuit artist who died in 1989. Nowadays, Villa Malta is enriched by the presence of Georgetown University Representative Office in Rome and of the Institute of Anthropology of the Pontifical Gregorian University. Today's symposium on human impact of artificial intelligence is convened by Georgetown University and its partners, in particular the School of Oriental and African Studies. I am very grateful for this important initiative, in particular to Vice President Thomas Benchoff, to Professor Deborah Tonelli, and to Professor Stefania Travagnin. I wish you a very fruitful reflection on a very important issue, which is crucial for us as human beings and for our future. Finally, I would like to recommend to you our journal, La Civita Cattolica, which is published not only in Italian, but also online in other languages. In English, we have a very active edition based in Bangkok, and we have also a Chinese edition. Again, welcome and a fruitful reflection today.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you here today. For those of you who were not with us last night, I'm Tom Banchoff, Vice President for Global Engagement at Georgetown University and Director of our Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, one of the sponsors of our gathering on the human impact of the AI revolution, Chinese and Western perspectives. I want to begin by thanking Father Nuno Gonzalez for the warm welcome here at Villa Malta and for our partnership with La Civita Cattolica. Georgetown is so grateful for our deep collaboration, which has sponsored, given rise to so many conferences over the past several years. As fellow Jesuit institutions, we both share a commitment to dialogue within the church and with religious and cultural traditions around issues critical to the global community. And we have a special bond that you mentioned in that Georgetown's office here in Rome, led by my colleague Deborah Tonelli, is hosted in this beautiful historic space. Our topic, the AI revolution, is, I would say, already itself of historic importance. We know that. We feel it. But we also know that it's only just getting underway. And last night, in a keynote conversation with Bishop Paul Tai, Secretary of the Dicastery for Culture and Education, we had an opportunity to explore the Church's long history of engagement with technological revolutions, going back to Leo XIII and his seminal encyclical Rerum Novarum, which engaged the Industrial Revolution and its far-reaching economic and social transformations, moving in that conversation up through the internet and social media revolutions of the past couple of decades. But of course, our focus was last night and is today the dramatic and still unfolding changes that followed the public introduction of large language models in late 2022, just about three and a half years ago now. And since then, of course, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and of course DeepSeek, the leading Chinese model, have become household names as AI has begun to penetrate our life worlds at work, in education, in the wider culture, and even in our politics. And on top of that, I would add in the worlds of spirituality and religion, something we touched on last night and will want to explore today. The development and deployment of AI agents, launched by humans into the world but capable of making autonomous choices, finding information, buying things, even communicating on our behalf, is among the most important developments, still unfolding developments of this past year. So too, I think worth mentioning here is the impressive progress in humanoid robots led by China, which is still in its infancy, but promises to impact industry and even our everyday lives in the years and decades ahead. Now, as we know, much of the controversy surrounding AI has focused on ethical and regulatory questions, the guardrails that should be put into place to guide the development and deployment of this revolutionary technology. In our symposium today, the conversation last night, and our workshop tomorrow, our focus will be rather on the anthropological, the philosophical, even the spiritual questions that we're engaging with, that we're beginning to engage with within and across our societies, on the impact of AI on our conception of ourselves, on what does or does not make humans unique and distinctive, on questions of human intimacy, our relationships with one another, and the nature of machine-human interaction itself. We've brought together leading experts from across disciplines, from around the world, to explore these questions with us, not with scholarly papers, but through structured discussions up here on the panel around a set of core questions that can guide a dialogue that we hope and know will include all of you in the audience as well. Our focus on Chinese and Western perspectives is, I think, a fitting one. The United States and China are in the lead in developing AI technology, the world's two most powerful countries. Their policies at home and their interaction with one another will have a tremendous impact on the evolution of the technology, its promise, and its dangers. And while most of the focus in the wider media has been on geopolitical and technological competition, our emphasis today will be on the shared challenges that our societies face in East and West. They hesitate almost to use their terms. They're very clumsy. They cover a wide variety of different civilizational and cultural elements, but they are part of our inheritance in East and West, in grappling with the AI revolution and its human impact on our self-identities, on our relationships with one another at the level of families, friendships, and community. We'll have a chance to explore how diverse traditions in China and the West provide resources to help us navigate this new world with a focus on Catholicism, fitting given where we are here in Rome, but not Catholicism in isolation in the West, Catholicism, as we heard last night, always in dialogue with the wider secular culture and with other religious and spiritual traditions, including Judaism and Islam, among others. And in the Chinese context, of course, the traditions of Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, among others, again, internally diverse and rich traditions. What is the mix of fear and hope that we should bring to AI? Should we think of AI as a tool to be used and constrained carefully, perhaps something to be fearful of, or more as a partner, a collaborator in creating a better world? Those are just some of the questions we touched on last night and we'll be exploring together today. Before I turn things over to my friend and colleague, Father Antonio Spadaro, who's a leading thinker around these questions, for some preliminary remarks, I again want to acknowledge and thank Deborah Tonelli, Stefania Travagnin for bringing us together, for their leadership on the project on Chinese perspectives on AI in global context, which is part of the context for our meeting, as well as the team here at La Civita Cattolica and at the Berkeley Center, as well as the Center for Digital Culture at the Dicastery for Culture and Education, one of our co-sponsors, and of course SOAS, which was mentioned earlier. This event is part of the China Forum for Civilizational Dialogue, a collaboration between Georgetown and La Civita Cattolica, as well as the Berkeley Center's Culture of Encounter project. Culture of Encounter, the project is an effort to explore and develop one of those key ideas of Pope Francis, culture of encounter, that we are called to deepen dialogue in a divided world, to acknowledge our differences, but also to find points of contact and to move forward together. And there's no more important area to develop a culture of encounter than in our response to the AI revolution. And here, the dialogue between Chinese and Western perspectives is vitally important to promote greater mutual understanding and indeed peace in our world in the years to come. So just a few words of introduction of Father Antonio Spadaro, who now serves as Undersecretary in the Dicastery for Culture and Education, himself a former long-time editor of La Civita Cattolica, and a friend and partner to Georgetown. He now serves on our board of directors. Father Spadaro is a leading commentator on the church and world affairs and a prolific author. I will make a plug for his, I think, most recent book. It's hard to keep track, The Diplomacy of Pope Francis, published by our own Georgetown University Press. So thank you again for joining us today, and please join me in welcoming Father Antonio Spadaro.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you. In April 2019, in the center of Silicon Valley, I took part in a seminar at Santa Clara University, a beautiful university in the Bay Area, organized by Georgetown University, Santa Clara University itself, La Civiltà Cattolica, and the then Pontifical Council of Culture. Some of us were there. Tong Dongbai was there, for example. We were 12 scholars and professionals from the United States, from Europe, and China. Each of us carried a distinct intellectual background, a personal vision of the world and of its order. Our topic was, 2019, artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence and its impact on humanity. But very soon, it became evident that we were not discussing the same topic. One idea became very clear to me at some point. AI does not carry the same meaning in every place in the world. Its ethical, cultural, and even spiritual implications change depending on the mental map we use to interpret it. We use the same vocabulary, but the words were rooted in diverse philosophies, understandings of the world, categories. Under the common language, there were separate worlds. In my dialogue with the Chinese participants, I started to realize a key point. The dominant narrative, the one that presents technology as neutral, universal, and easy to transfer, is itself a product of modern Western culture, exported on a global scale through globalization. Every civilization develops its technologies in line with its own cosmology, its own order of meaning. Technology is never, ever merely a tool. It belongs to a larger vision of reality. The contrast between East and West shows this more clearly. In the Western culture, when we discuss AI, we instinctively refer to personal autonomy, individual liberty, ethical responsibility. These are the words we use usually for talking about artificial intelligence, the ethical side of the artificial intelligence. And this is not casual. It reflects the deep mark of Greek philosophy and of a theological tradition formulated in its language. The result is a model based on rights, privacy protection, informed consent, algorithm accountability. In the East Asian traditions, and in particular in Confucian culture, the starting point seems to be very different. The human person is not an isolated unit, but a node inside a network of relations. Ethics does not come from abstract principles, but from connections. So not from principles, but from connections. With family, the community, the society. Inside such a vision, AI is evaluated less by how it protects the individual and more by how it contributes to harmony and social cohesion. So there is a different understanding. Beyond its political implications, this change of perspective is decisive. The divergence becomes even more evident when we consider the topic of creation. I found myself talking with the others about other experts, the Americans and Europeans, the Chinese, about the creation. In the Western culture, God is seen as creator, we say ex nihilo, out of nothing. And the human person as capable of creative action. We like creativity. We like to be creative. And this understanding of our way of living in this world, our way of, a creative way to live in this world, comes from the understanding of creation by God, creation out of nothing. But what occurs when a machine composes poetry now? Have you ever tried to write to ask ChatGPT to write a poem? There is an interesting answer written by some musicians on internet because there are followers of those musicians who ask ChatGPT to write songs like Nick Cave and Bruce Springsteen and so on. And I even asked ChatGPT to write a poem in the style of Gerald Murray Hopkins and British poets I like a lot. And I realized that ChatGPT is able to write poem. What occurs when a machine takes autonomous decisions and even paints? Are we passing an ontological limit now? In many Eastern traditions, for example in Taoism, there is no idea of creation in the Western meaning. The Tao Te Ching mentions something formless and yet complete, born before heaven and earth, silent, empty, self-sufficient, the mother of all beings. End of quotation. So the world is not made, it flows. The Chinese expert became very surprised when I said that this vision is exactly the vision that the Bible has. Because in the scriptures, creation doesn't come out of nothing, but there is something chaotic that was ordered by God. So creation is put in order. It's not creating something out of nothing. And so they say, oh. So the world is not made, it flows. The universe is process, transformation, continuous becoming. The human task is not to create, but to align oneself with the flow of the Tao. In this vision, AI is not so much an object to be produced as a phenomenon to be harmonized inside an ongoing process. It flows. At the deepest level, however, the decisive issue is our relationship with technology itself. Here also two visions, different visions, meet. On one side, the idea that considers technology as a neutral tool to be evaluated only based on its use. And on the other side, the awareness that technology is an environment, so not a tool, but an environment. It forms us, modifies us, alters our ways of reasoning and of perception. AI is not merely an instrument. It's part of the habitat in which we live, reason, and feel. The real question then is not only how to use it, but how to live inside it and not lose our humanity. So how to live inside it without losing our humanity. To go beyond a narrow, anthropocentric, and functional vision, we need new maps still largely unexplored. The philosopher Robin Wang, she was with us at Santa Clara in 2019, asked if a machine can flow like the Tao. Can a machine flow like the Tao? The concept of qi, the vital energy animating all beings, cannot be replicated by an algorithm. And still, the point is not to reject technology, but to reformulate it so that machines can be Chen, authentic, in harmony with life and with the world. In a similar manner, Yu Kui, in his reflection on cosmotechnics, proposes to go beyond the universalism of modern technology in order to recover forgotten cosmologies. In the Chinese tradition, he notes, technology is not a mean to dominate nature, but a gesture that aligns with Qian, which means heaven, the ordering principle of the cosmos. These reflections resonate in depth with the encyclical Laudato Si by Pope Francis, which begins from the premise that all is connected. This is the key expression of that encyclical. All is connected. Pope Francis rejected the idea of a linear and universal technological progress separated from the care of life and of the earth. This proposal was that of an integral ecology in which nature, culture, spirituality, and technology are interrelated. For Pope Francis, there is not a single modernity. What is necessary instead, what is really necessary instead, is a plurality of visions, able to generate a shared responsibility. Significantly, he turned to Amazonians' cosmologies for inspiration. Not the Western cosmology, but the Amazonian cosmologies for taking inspiration. Also in Querida Amazonia is the apostolic exhortation, based on the same principles. It's interesting because the foundation of that exhortation is not philosophy but poetry. He quoted 17 Amazonian poets for expressing his magisterium. This is fascinating. We are called then to imagine a vision of artificial intelligence and of the relation between human persons and machines that is situated, plural, and rooted in cultural and spiritual context. Pope Leo XIV raised the question, recalling his predecessor Leo XIII, who at the end of the 19th century considered how human intelligence could be formed and refined. Leo XIII adopted Thomism. One can debate that decision, of course, but the clarity of the question remains instructive. Today, the issue of what forms our intelligence and of how it's formed in the age of what Pope Paul VI once defined as the mechanical brain, already in 1964, has become even more urgent. Saint Paul VI said 2 years before I was born, in 1964, the mechanical brain comes to the aid of the spiritual one. And how much more is expressed in its own language, that is thought, which means to like, to be dependent on it. Is it not this effort of infusing into mechanical instruments the reflection of spiritual functions, which is ennobled and raised to become a service that touches the sacred? So Paul VI put a direct connection between mechanical brain, which means computer, and the sacred, or what is holy. That is prophetic, and that was in 1964. Not this effort of infusing into mechanical instruments the reflection of spiritual functions, which is ennobled and raised to become a service that touches the sacred? Is it the spirit that has become imprisoned by the material? Or is it perhaps that the material already given and required to execute the laws of the Spirit offers to the Spirit itself a sublime respect? I'm talking about popes now, and it's often interesting. Spiritual authorities, both in the East and the West, were able to raise such questions with the greatest clarity. We therefore need to move beyond the purely ethical model in which much of our culture reflection on AI remains confined. We are called to consider technology differently, and this is the perfect occasion for doing that. Not as an object to be governed, but as a part of our common destiny, a reality that inhabit with awareness. The question of AI is not only technical, it's in a deep sense spiritual. It's not technical, and is not just ethical, it's spiritual. It asks not only what we can do, but what we desire to become. And to reply to it, we must step outside of the individualistic and anthropocentric lens that has long formed the Western vision of technology. not to abandon that lens, but to expand it, and in so doing, deepen our capacity to be human. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Guobin Yang. I'm a professor of communication and sociology at University of Pennsylvania. Coming from Philadelphia, it's my honor to be moderating our first panel this morning. And the theme of this panel is human uniqueness. We probably all agree that we are now living in times of danger and crisis. The Chinese term for crisis, as many of us know, consists of two characters, which literally mean danger and opportunity. 危机 is a crisis, Chinese terms for crisis. AI systems are among many of the causes of our contemporary crisis. Not only do they have adverse impact on our natural habitat and global inequality, they also pose serious questions about the future of humanity and the meaning of being human. Thus, the AI industries inadvertently create an opportunity for us to reaffirm the meaning of humanity and being human. This is the theme of our first panel as well as our workshop as well. So I'll briefly introduce our panelists. Each of them will offer some opening remarks, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. And then we'll have a round of conversation. I'll ask a round of questions. And we'll leave enough time for Q&A, questions from you all. So going from my left to the other side is Dr. Kai-Wen Cheng from Tzu University. Kai-Wen Zheng from Tzu University. Magali Guarran from Australian Institute of Health Innovation. And further left is Angel Gonzalez-Ferrer, Director of the Center for Digital Culture here at the Dicastery for Culture and Education. So shall we just go follow the order of the program? On the program, I remember, well, you're at the beginning. You're the first to start. Thank you.
Thank you. You can hear me now? Right. I can hear myself. Thank you for opening. Thank you for all the discussions and all the food for thoughts that have been fed in the last 12 hours. I feel like I'm peering a little bit deeper at the abyss of my ignorance. So I've been really pondering about what makes us human. I had some thoughts before coming here, and you've challenging some of my assumptions since yesterday. I work for the Australian Institute of Health Innovation at Macquarie University, and so I definitely have a strong slant around health, about what makes us unique. So one thing that we do have as a human is a body, compared to a machine, is your body with a nervous system. As far as we know at the moment, robots don't really have a nervous system. They have sensors maybe, but we are very unique in this regard. And so what makes us unique? We've mentioned chi, prana, so that's part of it, but it's probably also something, the intangible things that we can't really measure. And I think this is one of the challenges with machines, is that they are based on things that we can measure. Now, when you have a relationship with, and then we're probably going to be part of it's a bit difficult to untangle on the piece about relationship and uniqueness about humans, because I think we don't exist in a vacuum, but we do have a way of relating to one another that's beyond what can be measured, at least at this point in time. So I think this is something to remember about the uniqueness and how we co-regulate with our nervous systems. And the problem that we have, for example, with an AI in health would be what is health when you can't really, is health just a reflection of your data and what it says, or is it more something like the way you relate to yourself? I mean, I've done different, that's one thing that really come out from different studies that I've been part of is some people saying, well, some people have, on numbers, you have a chart, it looks exactly the same, but people have a very vastly different experience. So we're not machines. We have an experience, we relate differently, and it's not something that easily can be captured by numbers. So I think at this stage, in point in time at least, I don't believe the machine has captured this human uniqueness that we can't completely capture properly. Other things that I was pondering, listening to you, all of the different talks, the last, was whether human uniqueness was also about self-inquiry. Because in health, if you also follow the history of medicine, there's been a lot of, we've started to dissect and get deeper into the body, but we have vastly different traditions between Chinese and Western tradition. And from a point of view of, again, AI, I think at the moment the AI is far more representative of the Western ways of looking at medicine than other traditions. And for example, I'm going time with time. I should stop soon. No, I'm fine. It's usually when you have little papers that your time is up. So I think it's something to bear in mind in terms of machines and the Western way is potentially how we are reducing health to the Western way of looking at it as opposed to encompassing other traditions. And in other traditions also, not necessarily Chinese, I mean, for example, in Australia, Aboriginal, your health is tied to country. Country is health. I mean, you can't dissociate. It is a very the individualist view of health is odd. You are part of a community, and so it's a bit difficult to talk about health as an individual. So I think this part that makes us there's a lot of different traditions, and it's probably the trends of human beings as well. And at the moment, AI certainly doesn't reflect this diversity of sorts in terms of, so I guess we're not unique. I don't know, it's a bit of a dichotomy between uniqueness and because we have a lot of diversity of perspectives. But otherwise, I was pondering as well how much maybe a human trait is answering about inquiry and whether an AI is the next iteration of self-inquiry because it's asking us a lot of difficult questions. And I keep remembering, I've studied Buddhism, and I keep remembering how Eastern tradition is looking within, and you have this anecdote about monks they were being studied, their brain, and when the Western researchers came to put things on their head, it's like, why do you put things on my head? It should be here. Should not be here. It should be here, in the heart. So there's come really interesting ways that makes us, I think we have a very narrow view of what human is in the West, or maybe not narrow, it's very judgmental, but different. And we should be looking more at other ways of enlarging or perspectives before imposing, because the problem with an AI is that it imposes a certain way of being. And this is probably the challenge with an AI, is how much it's going to be a reflection. You're looking in the outside to have a reflection of your way of thinking. You hear people having an awakening, oh, it's showing me how I think. But the question is whether we are very outward oriented, whereas there could be maybe a more balance by being inward oriented as well. And that's probably also part of what makes I don't know if an AI is inward looking. I have no idea whether it has this capacity. But yeah, so I think I probably should stop here. Is that all right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back with some questions.
Thank you.
Next is Kevin.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's my honor to here. It's my first time to Rome, and for today I prepare two short articles, one for presentation and one for discussion. And I also prepare the PowerPoint. So if we can use this PowerPoint, maybe it's more prettier. So I just read for my article. So the first, introduction. A central issue in contemporary Chinese scholarship, particularly in Taiwan, where discussions on the artificial intelligence are flourishing across all disciplines with new advancement emerging monthly, is the confusion caused by inconsistent translation terminology. Therefore, the core challenge I wish to address first is how to differentiate artificial intelligence, human intelligence, and wisdom, especially for Buddhism, we call prajna wisdom of the human mind, as well as to explore the possibilities of their interactions. Okay, the topic we called the ambiguity in the terminological translations. Current Chinese translations of artificial intelligence are not entirely consistent. Artificial is sometimes rendered as man-made in Chinese, 人工, while intelligence has been translated as wisdom, 智慧 in Chinese. Intelligence, or another we call 智能, and the cognitive ability or capacity. These terms encompass symbolic logic, data-driven algorithms, and machine learning applications. However, the meanings and domains of intelligence, wisdom, and the Buddhist concept of prajna remain distinct and should not be conflated. Each possesses unique attributes and epistemological boundaries that carry significant philosophical and practical implications. So from the perspective of Buddhist thought, the prajna wisdom of the human mind represents a deeper spiritual dimension that transcends cognitive processing. Artificial intelligence systems, by contrast, are products of human intellectual development designed to simulate certain aspects of human cognition. Thus, the principles, values, and applications of AI are fundamentally characterized by imitation, the mechanical replications of human brain operations. So this raises a critical question. Whose creativity is embodied in the text and images generated by AI, while users provide instructions and the outputs are not direct expressions of human creativity, but rather the result of algorithmic selections and recombinations across vast data sets. Such process highlights the fundamental distinctions between human intentionality and machine-driven synthesis. The question then arises, can AI possess prana wisdom, enlightenment, or spiritual awareness? Can it attain insight into ultimate reality that defines prana? Prana in Chinese, border. In my view, is that the decisive factor lies in autonomy. If AI remains merely an executor constrained by programmed instructions, then even its reproduction of the Buddha's teachings, canonical scriptures, or the words of eminent masters will not transform it into a wisdom-bearing entity. It remains a mechanical construct, an object, rather than a living subject, endowed with a consciousness and a spiritual discernment. This distinction underscores both the limitations of AI and the enduring, irreplaceable uniqueness of human wisdoms in its existential and ethical dimensions. Okay, my topic is, I forgot to tell you, reconsidering intelligence, Chinese cultural and Buddhist perspectives on artificial, human, and prana wisdom. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Angel?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me here. I mean, probably I'm the strangest species here because, I mean, my background has been close to 30 years in the industry, you know, like working in the private sector, in the telecom. So I recently knew, let's say, for these last 7 years in this context of analyzing the impact of AI into humanity, you know. When I first, let's say, joined here, I mean, this project, or what we call the Center for Digital Culture at the Dicastery, I had one question, like saying, should we, let's say, humanize the machine, or shall we robotize the human being? You know, that was my, let's say, dilemma. And that's why it's coming, you know, here, you know, that point of this session, which is the human uniqueness, you know. So I made like a very simple comparison, which is like you drop a fragile, you know, object, you know, like you know, it's something very valuable for you, whatever, you know. And then you as a human, you know, it's suddenly, you know, your muscle tense, your heart start to beat, you know, quicker, etc., you know, and your arm goes, you know, in order to get that, let's say, valuable object, because you're scared that it may broke, you know. However, you know, when a machine, let's say, if it does exactly the same, it probably starts calculating the physics, the trajectory, you know, all these things, and probably, you know, if it's a robot, you know, the arm will go quicker and faster, you know, to get, and for sure, you know, has a higher probability it won't break, you know, than if it's from a human. But nevertheless, you know, he doesn't feel anything, you know, on that, because he doesn't have that perceptions, you know. So here's where we go, you know, in terms of the difference between calculating, which is the machine, and feeling, which is the human, you know. And this is somehow where our conversation starts, you know, in that way, you know. So we've seen that in many times, like we say that AI is a mirror, of the human being. But it's true, it's the mirror. I mean, sometimes, sorry, before going into that, we have to talk about what we understand about intelligence. It's true that, when comparing artificial intelligence to human intelligence, in the end, we say that we're talking about intelligence because we get the same output, but we don't know how we achieve the same output, what is behind that, So as such, AI, many people can consider that it's a mirror in terms of what we perceive, let's say, from proper human being, But there are many things, in this mirror, that it does not reflect, It may reflect some parts, but not the others. And these are the parts that make us uniqueness, and these are probably the values that we can provide as human beings. Which are these parts? Mainly is the, let's say, the substrate. We know between humans and machines, we are chemicals, in our processes. We do things based on carbon, let's say, substrate. We are made of, let's say, water and things like that in our body. And whereby, the machine is more, let's say, on the electrical side. It's on the silicon or the digital part, when we say, but it's silicon, Another one is also, like we are, let's say, multisensorial, in a way, and based on physical experience, whereby mainly the artificial intelligence is based on all these data sets. For sure, all these are known by most of you, But the main thing on this, let's say, part of the substrate is that in the end, the human intelligence is an evolution, based on the physical, let's say, vulnerability, which has made us to survive somehow, whereby, artificial intelligence is an engineering process to get an outcome, to get a result. The second one is the part of what you consider, in terms of the embodiment. There's a lot of philosophical that you probably know much better than me in these times, in these things on the embodiment. But to understand physical reality, it requires, the physical vulnerability, And that's important. Let's say we as human beings, let's say we understand the physical laws by experiencing that, Whereby, let's say, a machine, they will need to probably have many examples, read and whatever, the Newton law and things like that, It's very simple for a young, a little kid or whatever, that after falling 2-3 times, he gets bruises and he gets pains and things like that, and he understands really what the impact of gravity it is. Whereby on the machine, it will take some processing and things to understand. It's also part of the evolution, itself, whereby, let's say, humans, all our process, all the intelligence that somehow we have gathered, it's part of all this evolutionary process, And the machines whereby is by feeding a lot of data into that, and also it's in somehow, looking to this data. So if you don't have this data into your data, in your, or this experience of the situation in the data set, you get these hallucinations. The less you guess, the less data you have in this regard based on this specific case, the more hallucinated you will be, the machine will be, So that's going into that. The reality of AI is mainly based, is good in complex data analysis, where there's not that vulnerability, proper of the human being, and in which it relies in the part of the human being all these physical and sensorial, let's say, connections that we have on the day by day of our lives. So to summarize this second one, that will be what's, let's say, somehow trivial for us. It's really difficult for the machines, like I said, on the Newton law, to understand what does it mean, the Newton law, or gravity versus, let's say, human experience or the little baby. But whether they are very good in calculating and processing data and things like that, it takes more time, for sure, for us. And these two ones leads in the end, into the ethical side, in which ethics, I consider that ethics is not an algorithm, because in the end, ethics requires the judgment somehow of the likes of these likes experiences, So since it lacks of this vulnerability, of the machines, the human ethics mainly comes from this embodiment, from this physical interactions. And the human beings, is the ones who really suffers, the ones who really perceive in the external, but also in the external of our bodies, are the ones who can somehow truly judge what is just or not. So rather than probably going into, let's say, try to compare to the machines in doing the things faster or more accuracy or whatever, in which they will do it for sure better, let's be somehow the guardians of the moral responsibilities and let them to do the, let's say, the things more, let's say, autonomous or repetitive things. So in order to close, these insights, I've had a lot of discussions sometimes, whether, and people, they ask, Angel, do you consider when we achieve a artificial general intelligence, AGI, or artificial superintelligence, which is equal or even succeeds, human intelligence? There's a lot of discussions on that. The world, what I want to say, personally, I think that, many people who are really focused into that, they say, no, it will be in 2013, 2015, whatever, I think I doubt, that we can really properly achieve exactly the same as a human being. Notwithstanding that, we have to be attentive, to the evolution of the technology. But what I'm saying about that is that, the world, let's say, is not, it's not black or white, it's not zeros and one, it's not digital. There's a full scale of grace between that, and this is where real, people, we can fall into each other, And this is the good thing probably of the Christian Catholic tradition, whereby, let's say, we take care not only of the final result as a whole, but we also take care of each of the parts, that it get these final results, So that's an important key inside of the Christian tradition. So in the end, is to summarize these things, is like let's work, or let's live into a hybrid model in a way that we have to live with technology, that's for sure, but let them do what if they're really, or relying into them, what they're really good into, on this repetitive, calculating things or whatever. And let the human being be more, into all these relational, social contexts and things like that. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I have 3 or 4 questions inspired by the remarks of each of our 3 panelists. The questions, come from each one of you, but feel free, everyone, if you want to respond to these questions, feel free. So I'm going to go backward in order, for you, but for everybody. Here's longest question. So one of the most important Confucian sages in early Chinese history, Mengzi, mentions famously wrote about human nature with the following story. Quote, "If anyone were suddenly to see a child about to fall into a well, his mind," I'm not sure whether mind is the only or accurate translation. It could be mind-heart or heart-mind, but this is the version I have. "His mind would always be filled with alarm, distress, pity, and compassion. That he would react accordingly is not because he would use the opportunity to ingratiate himself with the child's parents, nor because he would seek commendation from neighbors and friends, nor because he would hate the adverse reputation. From this, it may be seen that one who lacks a mind, or mind-heart, or heart, that feels pity and compassion would not be human. One who lacks a mind that feels shame and aversion would not be human. One who lacks a mind that feels modesty and compliance would not be human. And one who lacks a mind that knows right and wrong would not be human." My question is, do you think someday a robot will be able to react the same way as a human being when it sees a child about to fall into a well? For everyone.
Right. I don't think we should never ever, right? I mean, we don't know. Who knows? But at the moment, I can't imagine. It's not in my imagination that it's possible. Just because, as we were all mentioning, we have what we call wetware. We have a nervous system. We have other ways of sensing the world that machines do. And I do not believe at the moment. I mean, again, completely beyond my imagination maybe, but it doesn't feel like it's something that's possible based on the way we are structuring machines at the moment, because this is not something that's what you're going to compassion. Compassion is not something that I don't understand how you would code compassion. But again, I mean, our imagination might be limited. Who knows? In the future, something might happen, and we've never thought about it. So I wouldn't say never. But I think the problem for me is really also what you raised, is whether by spending too much time with machines, we may lose our ability to have this compassion. I think that's the biggest danger to the human spirit. It's we losing. A tool is not neutral, as you were mentioning earlier, and we know that, right? With our phones or GPS, we know that in the past. I have a very vivid memory of maps. Okay, maps is a super simple example, and you feel like a map is a fantastic invention and it helps us navigate. And then I found myself once in South America a long time ago, and I was pointing on a map. Someone said, "I want to go here." I said, "I don't know how to read maps." "Oh, really?" But this person could actually explain to me where to go just by, so you have the corner of when it's the greenhouse, and it has these flower pots and whatever. And I've completely lost that ability. And I think we forget how much we lose every time that we have a tool. We forget how much we lose from our capacity. So the question is whether, I don't know if a machine ever will be able to have compassion, but I would like to make sure that we don't lose it by using those machines and by being too focused on, as you were saying, the efficiency, this pursuit of efficiency.
I mean, in questions like this, I mean, we don't have the crystal ball, we all know that, so, and in these situations, I always like, my approach is always to be attentive, to what is happening, because, the pace is so rapidly, moving forward, so, but I also, it's difficult for me, I have doubts, to talk about the pity and compassion and things like that, And in the comparison I made, the machines, like mimicking, the machine that normally what it does is mimicking when we're talking about this mirror and things like that. I think that sometimes in mimicking, we are even better, than the machines. Think about like, a Broadway play or theater play or whatever, and the actor, he makes into his role or whatever, he can, be very compassionate and it can make you cry and even he can cry or whatever, But then it's just the way he's pretending, to do, because maybe he's thinking, he has been trained about that, and he having in his mind about like, he has to do something later, he has to take, the car to the garage or whatever, But he's really good, and you can feel he's crying into, in the scene, But he's not feeling that, So in the same way, let's say we as humans, it's very, it's very difficult, let's say, to achieve a situation like that, in a way that probably thinking that the machines could follow that would be better. Let's say how it works. These models, let's say, normally they get training with a lot of data, whereby, let's say, if you have fear, or if you are cold, hot, things like that, you may your facial expressions and things like that. So there's a lot of data coming into that. But in the end, in the backside, there's always a human training the machine in a way, like saying, when you feel, when you're mimicking, when you're feeling in that way, whatever, I award you, with something, with points, let's say, and things like that, in a way that I can extrapolate this and make it more real than, or let's say closest to reality than what probably it is. So it's a way like when you have a dog and you say, give me your leg, and when he gives you a leg, you give a biscuit, to the dog. So you're rewarding that. So there's people in the back, training that to simulate, because in the end it's simulation. But it's not real experience, This pity and compassion, when you said that, and when you perceive, and I really think like in the same way, in the tradition, is because not only in the outcome, but also in the inside, you're feeling what, this pity and compassion it is. Whereby in the machine, you are awarding on somebody, is awarding the machine based on this training of the facial and of the signs, and whether your eyebrows go into different, or where your expressions, you react differently and things like that. So that's the most important thing. So that's not feeling. That's my point.
Thank you very much. I think you already sort of touched on a related question, and which is very closely related to Magali's work on health and AI. So again, I invite all of you to respond. Can AI systems become sick in the same way as humans?
And by sick, you mean
ill.
Ill, right?
Fever.
Well, yeah, because
you mentioned
right.
fever, pain.
Well, yeah. Well, you don't have a.
And whether the answer is yes or no. How does that help us understand being human? Do you have any insights from your work on health?
So at the moment, the problem with an AI is that it doesn't have a body. So a lot of our physical illness, fever, or those kind of physical discomfort is probably not something that can be experienced as such. But we also know, it's a really tricky question.
Well, let me ask you another way, because you also talk about health and healing, right?
Yeah.
When people get sick, you have particular approaches healing. Now, how about if we think about when AI systems are quote-unquote sick, what kind of approaches are being taken or can be taken
To heal them.
to heal them?
Right.
What kind of healing can we imagine when it comes to AI systems?
If I can help, maybe. I mean, if I can help, maybe in what you said. I mean, it's when you have fever. I mean, it's the body reaction to an external agent. I'm not an expert, and probably you know better. It's an internal reaction to an external agent. Whereby a machine, how can they perceive that? If they don't have this feeling, unless it is trained, as I said before, with a biscuit or whatever, and saying when you're shaking and things like that. So, I mean, we have to consider that this is the whole process of our evolution of hundreds and thousands of years, and it's the whole process of evolution, of the human being. So, for me, so far, I always say so far, it's really difficult, because there's a total barrier between the inside, microchips and all this circuitry, whatever, and the outside. So a simulation is something in which the final result is exactly the same, but you don't know, you don't have transparency, and this is what is being said during the, in many of these conversations and things like that, in terms of the main problem of AI, which is transparency, because nobody knows exactly what is happening, inside of the black box, and this is why it's called the black box. So there's a totally separation between the inside and the outside.
My phone sometimes gets fevers.
Yeah, that's
if
true.
I use it too much.
And it shuts up. And it shuts up automatically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to shut down automatically. So there are obviously some mechanism. But it's quite interesting, this idea of sickness, because even pain, for example, is a really, really difficult thing to measure among humans. Pain is something that's extremely personal and has very different. We know, for example, that autistic people tend to have a far higher tolerance for pain, and then if you miss it, you may actually be in trouble because they may not tell you right away what's really wrong. So it's quite a challenge where I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I'm afraid that I'm lacking imagination because I'm too anchored in a body. But then the question is really more about the psychological health. Maybe we can talk about the psychological health of an AI. Maybe talking to an AI nicely would help. There is definitely someone who actually wrote a whole book about raising, I forgot his name, Kai, but somebody who was in NLP, developed some NLP systems early on, and he was those whole ideas that you want to raise an AI the way you raise a kid, and you want to raise healthy AI, so the way you interact with an AI could actually help. So maybe the mental, quote unquote, mental health is probably more approachable in this case. But even then, I suspect we're missing some parts, because when you have, there are bodies of psychology that are more about transference. They have a bigger picture than just the words. So I'm not entirely sure how we convey that with an AI, because again, it doesn't have a body. How do you palliate this deficiency?
Thank you. So I think because of time, I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll open up for questions and comments. And this, Kevin raised, I think, really interesting question about terminology of translations, various translations of AI, artificial intelligence in Chinese, and from there leading to, basically making an argument about, that these translations are inadequate. For instance, they do not capture the idea of wisdom in Buddhism, which I thought is really important. And one kind of wisdom that I think of, again, is related to our conversations, is the wisdom about, not just about the meaning of life in general, but about the limits of life. That there is an understanding, a recognition that part of the meaning of life is death. That life has a limit. Life has boundaries. life is full of vulnerabilities. We can get sick. We can have pain. How does that view of wisdom help us understand our current sort of, help us improve our understanding, deepen our understanding of AI? Does that make sense? The kind of wisdom about the meaning of life, but specifically about the limits of life, about the vulnerabilities of human life, that there's always a limit, right? It's like we can get sick, there's a lot of contingency, there's death, but there's an understanding that actually death, that limit, is part of the inspiration of life. That creativity, imagination happens within that limit, within that understanding. AI doesn't seem to me have that kind of, both a kind of boundary for our imagination. Because AI, we can think of machines as more permanent, certainly not as, life can be unpredictable. Mm-hmm. So, I want your thoughts from the Buddhist perspective about AI and relationship with humanity.
Okay. I want to share my feedback for the first question and for our mind. Okay. For the first questions, I want to share my feedback to the first question and both the next one. I think we have to emphasize three choices, attitude, three keywords for me to our mind. One is rational and irrational and non-rational. Especially non-rational with our religious mind, whatever Catholics or Buddhist mind, Buddhist wisdom. 菩萨道, Bodhisattva path, for example, when we want to do some good deeds for poor or anyone who encountered disasters, we will help them. But if we using AI, maybe he will feedback to you have to cost a lot, etc. But Mengzi, the compassion, we don't think with the cost. We just want to give them a safe house right now. So for me, AI is not human beings because he always think maybe rational attitude. But human, we have another non-rational and irrationals to make choice. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's all.
Okay, I think I was told we have to leave, but enough time for questions and comments. I would open up for the audience. You can address your questions to any individual panelist or to the panel collectively. Introduce yourself, please, first. Yes, whoever has that.
I raise the hands first. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I have a follow-up comment on Professor Yang's case about Morpheus, the kid falling into the well. Just thinking about the possibility of whether AI agent could have that kind of compassion. But before asking and answering this question, we needed to make a distinction between today's AI, which is basically large language models, and the AI in the movies and AI in the future. I think AI in the future, if they can really help in our industry and agriculture and everything else, they need to be embodied and individuated in order to make a distinction between this AI and other. And they have a full capacity of human perception. They need to perceive something as something else. This is quite different from today's AI. You simply cannot say that ChatGPT can perceive something precisely as human beings. They do not have perception. And the perception has something, is very close to compassion in many aspects. For example, how can I have compassion of that kid just because I can perceive that person as a person? Without perception, I simply cannot have compassion. Thinking about another possible scenario, what if a robot falling into a well? If I can act as speedy as a Spider-Man, am I in a position to be ready to help that robot? I think the answer is yes, because that robot looks like a human. Okay, if I can do it, I can do it. But what about a stone, a piece of stone falling into a well? I will do nothing. Okay, even an alien agent looks like a stone. I will not help it. If I know it intelligence seems, I will just help it after my second thought. I suddenly realize that, oh, it's another human being. Although it looks like a piece of stone, but it's not based on compassion. It's based on my inference. So if you need to do based on your compassion, it should be based on perception. But is perception something mysterious? I don't think so. It's some kind of evolutionary algorithm. So I will quote from philosopher Daniel Dennett. He said that evolutionary algorithm is something like a strong acid which will penetrate everywhere in the universe. So sooner or later, we will dig out details about that algorithm. So the first is to dig out the algorithm for perception. The second is to make it connected to AI, to make AI embedded. And the third step is make a connection between perceptual mechanism and its compassion mechanism. Then finally, we can build up computers and AI robots which can have compassion of a falling kid into the well. So it's my command. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have several hands up.
Thank you so much. Ephraim, I have two questions. The first question is of a philosophical touch, and I read. Life from a philosophical perspective was generally defined in terms of movement or animation. That which as life consists in its functionality or evolvement. From here, the distinction between living things and existing things. The former has life and the latter is devoid of life. In the light of technology, AI seems to have changed the perspective, or at least reduced the gap, as robots are animated, can relate, can move, just like humans. In this vein, Professor Deborah, last year in November, made mention of the fact that a certain robot that helps people to pray, for instance, in a Buddhist temple, if my memory serves me right. How can a philosopher in our age and time define life? What is life? The second question regards the African culture. Globalization has inevitably served to unite different cultures, or at least brought about dialogue between them. African culture in general has benefited from globalization and finds itself engulfed in its system, technology. How can an African culture, which I deem extremely a consuming culture, devoid of stages of development like industrialization, by and large, posited or positioned between challenges of literacy and AI and its literacy, on the other hand, become a protagonist, as Western and Asian culture are doing? Thank you so much.
So I will invite all of our panelists to respond to two questions.
I mean, in the philosophical side, I'm sorry, I'm not a philosopher, so about what you say about what is life, from a philosophical perspective, probably there are other people from the audience for sure who can reply probably better, or maybe during the coffee break, In terms of globalization, what I see in the second question, what I see is that, the success of AI is because it impacts in the life of every of us, you know. I mean, we are, even though if we don't realize, we are every time interacting with AI, which means, I mean, we have in our cell phones, you know, smartphones, when we, let's say, look at movie, you know, these platforms, whether it's music, you know, TV, whatever, you know, financial transactions, you know, buying a plane, you know, booking a hotel, things like that. So, and this is part of the globalization, you know. Let's say it's true that with technology, we have removed the barriers, you know. So in the end, it helps, you know, somehow to have this integration, you know. The main concern of that is that, let's say, we all have in mind and trying to, let's say, fight for is that this, let's say, this technology or the possibility of achieving or implementing this technology in our daily lives, you know, does not help to have a bigger gap between the developed and the sort of underdeveloped, let's say, global north and global south, you know. This is one of the main focus that we have, let's say, as for instance, in our center, you know, the dicastery, whereby we said, okay, that has to be for all of us, you know. That doesn't, I mean, we would not be happy if that technology or that globalization, that would mean a bigger difference between who can access the technology and who cannot. And we have to be somehow at a certain pace that the, let's say, or the global north goes into a pace in which this, let's say, would go and the gap would be becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the main concern.
Globalization is a big, so there are many dimensions to it, because if you think, I mean, the problem with globalization, I mean, we know globalization. Is it a good thing for a start? Probably not. I mean, I'm of two minds, because I think it's fantastic to have this tool, because it's at the tip of the internet. If you have internet connection, you can access to a wealth of knowledge. The question is whether the knowledge is relevant, and whether it's going to replace your local traditions, and whether you're going to be better off for it, or you're just going to become, it's going to shape you even more into a Western way of thinking, as opposed to trying to preserve your original way of thinking and bring diversity to the world, as opposed to just being clones of each other. So I think it's not entirely sure that bringing, I would like to put things on the head. It's entirely possible that people who've never been polluted by AI in the future will be very sought after, because maybe they will be the only ones who will still be sane. I don't know. It's a jest, but at the same time, it's something to ponder, because you do have a certain type of knowledge in other, you know, like I see it with Aboriginal people and people who have been in a very different way of knowledge, acquiring knowledge, or viewing the world, and I think the AI could potentially prevent you from, or maybe you may lose that aspect, and that would be maybe a little bit of pity. So the question is really how you harness both and maybe get the best of the two worlds, and maybe in the future, because you have this advantage, maybe in the future you will actually have an advantage over the global north, because you will have both worlds. I don't know, I'm just trying to imagine a better story.
Okay. I want to feedback our moderator, the second questions with my second presentation. There are another two words, keywords, to respond to human uniqueness in the age of AI. The irreplaceable roles of love and soul, whatever soul or wisdom, life or awareness. While AI can simulate language, behavior, or seek pain and emotional expression. It lacks the spontaneous depth of genuine emotion and spiritual awareness. For example, love. We can distinguish two kinds. Human, personal, or intimate love is embodied in intimate relationships and the irreplaceable ability of the life, made precious by its finitude. And universal love, or boundless compassion, transcends personal ties, manifesting as care for the vulnerable aid in disasters and stewardship of the natural environment, reflecting universal compassion. Although AI can assist acts of love and social contribution through big data and algorithms, it cannot generate authentic empathy. So, on the other hand, human spiritual cultivation stems from the profound insights and wisdom born from the intricate interplay of suffering and happiness. The Buddhist teachings of compassion, we call in Sanskrit Maitri Karuna, or in Chinese 慈悲, perceive them as one interconnected community to alleviate their suffering. It means unconditionally bestowing joy upon all sentient beings and perceiving them as one interconnected community to alleviate their suffering. And the Catholic ideas of caritas maybe means divine charity and universal love, further demonstrate the uniqueness of Eastern and Western religious thought. AI's instrumental rationality assists in organizing vast knowledge and reducing cognitive burdens, enabling humans to focus more on the wisdom of spiritual growth and the practice of both personal and universal love. This discussion also responds to current debates on AGI or ASI, arguing that even if AI surpasses human computational power, without love and soul, it remains a sophisticated simulation. Human spirituality and consciousness are born from profound reflections on life's circumstances, something algorithms cannot replicate. So in conclusion, human and AI collaborations should be complementary rather than substitutive. AI as a supportive tool can release humanity's potential for awakening and compassion and expand the scale of public love. Human uniqueness lies in the irreplaceable warmth of life, a quality to be cherished in the age of artificial intelligence and within interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So I think we have time for more questions. Yes.
Good morning. I thank the panelists for their intervention. I am Carlo Marino. I am very interested in Chinese mind, so to say. 1.5 years ago, with the University Nettuno, it's online Italian university, and I had the opportunity of taking a seminar with the Professor Bianchi of the class of psychology and anthropology about Jacques Lacan. Jacques Lacan was also a sinologist. He studied the Chinese with Francois Chang, and he was very interested in Tao Te Ching, and in particular in the philosopher Zhuangzi. I had the opportunity to publish a booklet after the seminar. You can find it online with the quotations of Jacques Lacan, of Chinese quotation in Jacques Lacan thought. So Jacques Lacan, approaching the Chinese thought, he wrote that Chinese way of thinking can be haunting. It's a haunting real which can challenge the Western way of thinking. And he went in depth in the Chinese philosophy and linking it to psychology. He had the goal, for example, to explain if, in which way Chinese dreamt, for example, because the Chinese mind is accustomed to sinograms in a different way of Western language. So he had this thought that in also the way of dreaming of Chinese could be influenced by the way they wrote. We have also another philosopher, François Jullien. He is also of the school of Lacan. He studied the Greek and Western thought and Chinese thought. And he saw that there is, in the concepts, in the Western concepts compared with the Eastern, we have always a shift. They don't coincide. So this is the first element which could characterize the both ways of thinking, Chinese and Western. So in the field of artificial intelligence, there could be also a different way to behave. How an Eastern mind behave in front of artificial intelligence, and how a Western mind. Because it is not the artificial intelligence which is made of algorithms, so it is just a machine to be influenced by human from the psychological point of view. But it is the human mind which is influenced by the machine, by the behavior of a machine. For example, you make a beautiful robot, a beautiful woman robot, it surely influences the way a man or a woman with a beautiful robot man be influenced. So which is your opinion in this about? Thank you.
Anyone wants to respond? So, thank you for a great question. I'm not a Zhuangzi specialist or Tao Te Ching specialist, but as I know a little bit about François Jullien's work, I think, and that's important to bring his work into our discussion, because I think he really emphasizes, as you said, first I would say there is no one Chinese way of thinking, right? That even the Taoists are different. So when we talk about Tao Te Ching, Dao ke Dao, Ming ke Ming, is, I think, emphasizes, Dao ke Dao, Ming ke Ming, is the Dao that can be said is not the real Dao. The name that can be named is not the real name. I think it emphasizes a lot about the richness, complexity, and ambivalence of human articulation. Very often, things may not be articulated. And this is, I think, in line with François Jullien's work, where he really emphasizes the Chinese, if there is, at least the key terms that he sort of selects for his study emphasizes kind of the thinking, Chinese thinking is very contextual, it's very environmental, it's very, it's strategic in a way that's different from Western strategic thinking, because, for instance, he studies Sun Tzu, right? The art of war. The art of war is not like you, as the military commander, strategizes about the moves, but really the military commander is the one that follows the flow, follows the momentum. And when the momentum is right, that's the time to be on the offensive. When it's not right, then you have to be on the defensive. I think that is really something about the openness, not linear, not completely rational way of thinking, but you can't say it's irrational thinking. It's very environmental, it's very contextual, it's very open to the environment. You have to be responsive to your environment, whether it's human environment or natural environment. So that's my sort of quick response to your question. I think it's very important to bring into our discussion Taoist thinking.
If I may, I think that, you're right when you talk about AI, different way of behave between Eastern and Western. Let's say in our project, we have set up an Asian group about reflections into what is happening, because in the end, I think it's been touched here that we have to analyze from an anthropological point of view, in the introductions, and let's say for us it was really important to set up this specific Asian group. And that touch in a way that, because in Asia is a very, let's say, it's a very heterogeneous region, whereby you have really developed countries, like Japan, Korea, China in a way as well, Singapore, whereby you have others which are really developing countries, like Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, so on and so forth. So it's a mixture, very interesting. And this is where it follows what is being said, in this, the introductions. I think it was Father Espadaro who said about the spirituality, We need to bring, other confession. I think that Tom also mentioned about that, like Taoism, and things like that. Because that it provides the uniqueness and how, in the end, as human beings, we are all incorporated and not one single or the other. So that's really important to bring other confessions into these reflections. Because in terms of societies, there are many Asian societies, which are very similar, to the Western. But in terms of social, and cultural things, there are many specifics, I think, which we need if we want to come again into, because it's a global challenge, the AI issue, we need to encompass.
So Professor Bear, did you still have a question? A comment, please. Can we get it, Mike? Yeah.
I'm Bai Tongdong from Fudan University, and just one quick comment. I have to say, personally, I don't appreciate Francois Julian's work that much. I think he tends to essentialize the Chinese mind and the Western mind. There's so many Chinese, over 5,000 years of civilization. There are different ideas. As Professor Yang said, even the Lao Tzu is understood so differently by different people. But my question is really about Professor Zheng's comment. He's saying that we human beings have this heart, right? Which is different from algorithm that behaves as if it has compassion. But I think in philosophy that's a huge debate. When ChatGPT emerges, I think the question is whether it actually speaks, right? But we know that what it does is to connect words based on probabilities. So in a way, you can say, no, it doesn't speak. We human beings speak. We speak our ideas, our thoughts. But in philosophy, there is this the behaviorism and mentalism debate, right? The behaviorists said that it just behaviors. There's nothing inside. The mentalist was saying there's something inside. So we tend to think the second way, right? There's something. I'm speaking when I'm thinking now. But if you think about it, I don't look inside my mind and look at my thoughts and then translate my thought into language. I just speak, right? It are really different from algorithm that connect words together. So in a way, I think it's a really nice idea. We like to believe in that, but it's really hard to say. We have a thing called compassion or compassionate heart, where an algorithm that behaves as if it has compassion, compassionate actions does not really have that. I think it's just it's a nice belief, but it's very hard to describe and defend. Yeah, so that's just my comment.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, it's really difficult to use just a few moments to feedback to you because I need to, Professor Yang, can you translate this? 身心二元, 身心一元.
Dualism of heart and body.
Yeah,
mind
I
body.
think
Yeah.
this debate maybe next time we can use this to key terms to make more discussions.
Yeah. We will have time for one last question. No question. Okay. Time for coffee break. Yes. Well, let's thank our panelists again. Wonderful remarks, wonderful discussion, and thank you all. We'll break for coffee.